All right, let's dive in. We're tackling the origins of the Ponzi scheme today.
Ah, yes.
We've got this really interesting documentary about, get this, the man himself, Charles Ponzi.
Oh, wow.
And we're not just going to break down how this scheme worked, but, like, who was this guy?
Yeah.
How did he become, like, the poster child for financial scams?
It's, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this story is how much of Ponzi's path seems to have been influenced by, like, his early life.
Yeah.
He came from a family that, supposedly had some history of success back in Italy, but his father had a working class job. He was a postman.
Oh, interesting.
And so this contrast between, what he believed his family had been and the reality of his present circumstances seems to have had, like, a really profound effect on him.
Like, he was almost living in the shadow of, like, his family's past success.
Exactly. And I think that probably fueled a lot of his resentment towards, like, working hard,
Right.
Like, it created this obsession with getting rich quickly.
It's almost like he felt entitled to wealth without putting in the effort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you see this, the documentary really highlights this. He inherits some money from his father, and instead of, using it responsibly, going to college or whatever, he spends it all.
Just blows through it.
Just blows it. Like fancy clothes, expensive restaurants, all this stuff. It's all about appearances. It's all about keeping up this image. Even if it meant, like, living a lie.
Yeah, like building this fantasy world that can't possibly last.
Right. And of course it didn't. He ends up dropping out of college.
Right.
And is forced to kind of confront the reality of earning a living.
Which, for someone who seemed to hate the idea of honest work, must have been a really rude awakening.
Oh, yeah. And that's when we start to see this pattern emerge. He bounces from job to job.
Yeah.
Sign painter, waiter, dishwasher. These are all, like, honest jobs.
Right.
Like, that someone in his situation you would think might be, like, happy to take on.
Right.
But he just couldn't stick with anything.
Right.
He either quit out of frustration or or more tellingly, he got fired for trying to cut corners.
Oh, wow.
Or cheat customers.
Yeah.
He even served time in prison for forging a check.
So he was already showing signs of, like, dishonesty and cutting corners even before he came up with the Ponzi scheme.
Absolutely. It's like he's constantly testing the boundaries. He's looking for that way to game the system.
Right, right.
And, that eventually leads him to this bank in Montreal called Banco Zarasi.
Okay.
Where his boss is running a, what we sometimes call a robbing Peter to pay Paul scheme.
Okay.
So essentially he was taking deposits from new customers and using that money to pay off the older ones.
Ah, okay.
Promising these ridiculously high interest rates to just keep the money flowing.
So Ponzi found himself working for, like, in the middle of a financial scam.
Right. And this experience, I think, really likely exposed him to, like, the mechanics of how these schemes work.
Yeah.
Think of it like an apprenticeship for a con artist.
Oh, yeah.
They see how easily people can be deceived by the promise of easy money, and they start to think, maybe I could do that too.
Yeah.
But on an even grander scale.
It's like that saying, a lot of times con artists are people who were victims of scams themselves.
That's right.
So they see how it works and they think they can do it even better.
Exactly. Now the documentary doesn't tell us if Ponzi was, like, actively involved in this scam or if he just witnessed it.
Okay.
But it's, it's pretty clear that this experience must have some influence on his thinking.
So what happened next? Did he try to start his own scam right away?
Well, not quite. His boss eventually flees to Mexico
Oh, wow.
to escape the authorities, and Ponzi tries to make a run for the U.S.
Okay.
But ends up back in prison.
Another setback.
Yeah. But he eventually does catch a break.
Yeah.
He's released from prison, he returns to Boston, and he meets and marries Rose Necco.
Okay.
And he clearly wants to provide a good life for her.
Yeah.
The kind of lavish life that he's always craved.
So he's kind of starting over, but with the same desires, the same, like, I want to get rich quick.
Exactly. And, you have this combination of his past failures, his desire for quick riches, and now this new motivation to prove himself to his wife.
Right.
And it just created this potent mix
Yeah.
that made him even more determined to find that one sure thing that would make him rich.
Right.
He pours his energy into all these different ventures. His father-in-law's fruit business,
Oh, okay.
an import-export company, even a trade magazine. but each one just failed
Yeah.
miserably.
Like a whole string of bad luck.
Yeah, but I think all that failure just made him more desperate for that one big win.
Right.
And that brings us to the aha moment, when he stumbles upon the idea for his scheme.
Right.
It all started with a letter from Spain containing this unusual item, an international reply coupon.
An international reply coupon.
Or as they're known, an IRC.
Okay, I have to admit, I'm not familiar with those. What is an IRC?
Well, think of it like a prepaid voucher that you can use to send a letter back to someone in another country.
Okay.
And so, in the aftermath of World War I, exchange rates were fluctuating wildly.
Right.
Ponzi thought he could exploit these fluctuations to his advantage.
Okay.
He had this idea for what's called arbitrage.
Arbitrage. Now that's a word that might need some explaining.
Okay, well, arbitrage basically means buying an asset in one market and selling it in another where the price is higher,
Okay.
and you pocket the difference as profit.
Yeah, okay.
So Ponzi believed he could buy these IRCs in countries where the exchange rate was favorable, redeem them for U.S. postage stamps, and then sell the stamps at a profit.
Oh, okay.
It seemed brilliant,
Right.
and more importantly, it seemed legal.
Yeah, on paper, that sounds like a really clever business idea. So, what was the problem?
Well, as the old saying goes, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Right.
Because while Ponzi's arbitrage idea, might have worked in theory, in reality, it had a fatal flaw.
Okay.
The potential profits from these IRC transactions were so tiny, so minuscule, they'd be completely wiped out by the cost of shipping them internationally.
Right.
Like, there weren't enough IRCs in the entire world to make the kind of money Ponzi was dreaming of.
So it just wasn't a scalable business. It's
Damn.
like he hit a wall.
Yeah.
But instead of saying, okay, back to the drawing board, he just kept going.
Yeah, and that's where it gets really wild. Instead of admitting defeat, Ponzi just doubles down.
He doubled down on the IRC thing.
Well, on the allure of his brilliance, like, I've got this secret.
Right, but it wasn't real.
Right. But he starts pitching it to investors, promising these crazy high returns.
In like a short amount of time, right?
Super short. And remember, this is the roaring 20s.
Oh, right.
People are like ready to get rich.
Yeah. Everyone's trying to get in on something.
Exactly. And Ponzi, he's charismatic, he's confident, he's
He's a salesman.
he's selling it.
Okay, but if he wasn't using the money to buy and sell IRCs, where was it going?
That's the thing. He was using funds from new investors to pay off the old ones.
Oh, so he was just cycling the money.
Classic Ponzi scheme, like a financial house of cards.
Okay, so it's all about like keeping the facade going, right?
Yeah, as long as new money keeps coming in, the scheme can keep running.
But the moment it stops,
It all collapses.
and that's exactly what happened,
Oh
really.
yeah. I mean, within a few months, his company, the Securities Exchange Company, was bringing in millions. Millions. He
Yeah.
was living the high life, mansions, fancy cars,
The whole 9 yards.
the whole thing. But it was all built on a lie.
So all these people, I mean, they must have felt so betrayed when the truth came out.
Oh, absolutely. The documentary really captures the devastation. And it's interesting, you start to see suspicions growing.
Yeah, I mean, someone must have been like, wait a minute.
Financial experts, journalists, they're starting to question how he's generating these returns.
When no one else can, right?
Exactly. This doesn't add up.
So weren't there like red flags, like things people could have picked up on?
Tons of them. For instance, Ponzi was super secretive about his methods.
He didn't want anyone like peeking behind the curtain.
Right. And he insisted on controlling all the investments. Like, anyone asking too many questions,
They were out.
dismissed
I bet he probably just told people they were jealous of his success or something.
all the time. He even hired a publicist to manage his image
Oh, wow. So he's trying to control the narrative.
completely.
But you can't hide the truth forever. So what finally brought the whole thing crashing down?
Well, eventually the authorities launched an investigation.
Okay.
It didn't take them long to uncover the massive fraud.
And then, boom, the whole thing collapses.
The whole scheme unraveled. Thousands of investors, many of whom lost their life savings.
Oh, that's awful. It's a story that's still relevant today, right? I mean, these scams are still happening.
Absolutely, and that's why it's so important to understand how they work.
To learn from history.
Exactly. So let's talk about the lasting impact of Ponzi's deception and what we can all take away from it.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, even after all this time, you say Ponzi scheme and everyone knows what you're talking about.
It really is. Like, it's just
So
stuff.
his name is synonymous with this this kind of scam. It had a huge impact.
Yeah, and I think what's even crazier is how these types of schemes, they keep popping up.
Yeah, yeah.
Like they prey on that same desire, that get rich quick,
Yeah, it's like a virus, that mutates.
That's a good way to put it. Like,
Yeah.
it keeps adapting to find new victims.
Right, right.
And that's why I think it's so important to like understand the underlying mechanics of these scams.
Yeah.
Because even though the specifics might change, the core elements, they're always the same.
So like what are those, like, if we're trying to protect ourselves, what should we look out for?
I mean, number one, that promise of guaranteed high returns with little or no risk.
Right.
Like, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah, that's always a good rule of thumb.
Right. Be wary of anything that's offering returns that are just like significantly higher than the market average.
Right. If someone says they have a foolproof system to beat the market, like, that's a red flag.
Yeah, exactly. What else? Oh, pay attention to, like, the level of transparency.
Okay.
Legitimate investments, they come with detailed information about how your money is being used, what the potential risks are.
Okay.
If someone's being secretive or evasive about their methods, that's another big warning sign.
So like if you feel pressured, like, to make a decision quickly,
Absolutely.
that's a bad sign.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask tough questions.
Yeah.
And demand clear answers.
Yeah.
A legitimate advisor, they're gonna welcome those questions. They're gonna be able to explain things to
In
you.
a way that makes sense, yeah.
Exactly.
And it's always good to, like, do your research,
Always.
talk to people you trust, financial advisors,
Absolutely.
before making any big decisions.
Yep.
Yeah, it's so easy to, like, get caught up in the excitement, especially when someone is, like, as charismatic and persuasive as Charles Ponzi.
You're telling me, and that kind of brings me to this last thought I had for our listeners.
Okay.
If Ponzi's like IRC scheme, if that was so obviously flawed, like from the beginning,
Yeah.
why were so many people willing to invest?
Right.
Like, what is it about us that makes us, susceptible?
Yeah, what makes us vulnerable to these scams? Is it greed? Is it desperation, blind trust? I mean, what is it?
It really makes you think,
Yeah.
right? Like, how much of it is psychology?
Right.
Like, how do we get persuaded, especially when it comes to, money and this dream of getting rich quick?
Well, this has been a fascinating dive, that's for sure. I mean, we started with, like, his early life, all of his failed business ventures.
Right.
Then this brief moment where it seemed like he had this brilliant idea with the IRCs.
Yeah.
And then the ultimate, collapse of his scheme. It's a wild ride.
It is. But I think the important takeaway here is, we've learned how these schemes work.
Right.
And hopefully we can all use this knowledge to protect ourselves.
Because knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. The more we know, the better decisions we can make.
All right, well, until next time, keep diving deep, stay curious, and most importantly, stay vigilant.